Autumn's Embrace, Chapter 7. The weeks following the Harvest Festival drifted by in the same steady rhythm that defined Willow Creek, peaceful, predictable, and punctuated by the subtle beauty of autumn's final days. Each morning Elliot woke to the sight of the frost dusting the ground and the last of the golden leaves clinging to the trees. Reluctant to let go, his days had settled into a comfortable routine. Working on the farmhouse, running errands in town, and occasionally grabbing coffee or lunch with Lily whenever their paths crossed. But as much as he enjoyed the slower pace of life, Elliot couldn't shake the feeling that something was looming on the horizon, something that would force him to make a decision he wasn't sure he was ready for. He stood on the porch of his farmhouse one chilly afternoon, staring out at the barren trees that lined his property. The air was thick with the promise of winter, and a biting wind stirred the few remaining leaves on the ground. It was peaceful, but his mind was anything but. For the past few weeks, his former boss from New York had been calling more frequently, each time with a new offer, a new opportunity to return to the city and resume his old life. The most recent offer had been the most tempting, an executive position at a prestigious firm, one that would not only restore his career but elevate it to new heights. It was the kind of opportunity he had always dreamed of, the kind of job that came with status, power, and money. And yet every time he thought about going back, something held him back. It wasn't that the city had lost its appeal. New York was still as exciting, as vibrant as ever. But after spending the past few months in Willow Creek, Elliot had come to realize that there was something to be said for the quiet, for the simplicity, for the space to breathe. He had never thought he would find peace in a place like this, but now that he had, the thought of returning to the chaos of city life left him conflicted. The real issue, though, was Lily. Elliot had grown closer to her with each passing day, their connection deepening in ways he hadn't expected. It wasn't just her kindness or her warmth, though those were things he admired. It was the way she made him feel, like he belonged, like he had found a place where he could be himself, without the pressures or expectations that had always weighed on him in the city. He couldn't deny the growing feelings he had for her, but he also knew that if he accepted the job in New York, it would mean leaving her behind, and the thought of that was unbearable. Elliot sighed, rubbing a hand over his face as he stared out at the horizon. He had come to Willow Creek to escape the stress and demands of his old life, but now he was faced with a decision that felt just as weighty. Could he really leave his new life behind? Could he walk away from Lily, from the peacefulness he had found here? The sound of gravel crunching underfoot pulled him from his thoughts, and he turned to see Lily walking up the driveway, a scarf wrapped tightly around her neck and a warm smile on her face. Her cheeks were flushed from the cold, and her wavy hair danced in the wind as she approached him. "Hey," she called out, waving. "I thought I'd stop by. I was in the area." Elliot smiled despite the turmoil brewing inside him. Seeing her had that effect on him. Her presence always seemed to bring a sense of calm, of grounding. "Hey, Lily, want to come inside? It's freezing out here." She laughed softly. "Sure, I could use something warm." They stepped inside the farmhouse, the warmth of the wood stove immediately enveloping them as Elliot led her to the small kitchen. He busied himself making 2 cups of hot cocoa while Lily wandered around, taking in the progress he had made on the house. "You've been busy," she said, nodding toward the freshly painted walls and the new light fixtures he had installed. "It's really starting to come together." Elliot smiled, handing her a mug of cocoa. "Yeah, it's getting there. Still a lot to do, but it's starting to feel like home." They sat at the small kitchen table, the warm cocoa between them. For a moment neither of them spoke, both content to enjoy the quiet comfort of each other's company. "So," Lily said after a while, her tone gentle, "how are things going? You've seemed a little distracted lately." Elliot looked down at his mug, his fingers tracing the rim as he considered how to answer. He had been avoiding this conversation, unsure of how to explain the conflict that had been gnawing at him for weeks. But he knew he couldn't avoid it forever. Not with Lily. She deserved the truth. I've been thinking about my job, he said finally, his voice quiet. My old boss has been calling. They want me to come back. They've offered me a really good position, something I never thought I'd have a chance at. Lily's expression didn't change, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes, something that looked a lot like hurt. And are you going to take it? Elliot sighed, leaning back in his chair. I don't know. It's a great opportunity, but I don't know if I want that life anymore. Lily set her mug down gently, her hands resting in her lap. What do you mean? I mean, Elliot began, struggling to find the right words, that I'm not sure I want to go back to the city, to that pace, to the stress. Life here in Willow Creek, it's different. It's slower, quieter, and I think I needed that more than I realized. Lily nodded, her expression softening through the hint of sadness remained in her eyes. I understand, but it sounds like you're not sure what you want. Elliot looked at her, his chest tightening. I thought I wanted that job, that life, but now I'm not sure. For a moment they sat in silence, the weight of Elliot's words hanging in the air between them. Lily was quiet, her gaze focused on the table, her fingers tracing the edge of her mug. Lily, Elliot said softly, reaching across the table to take her hand. She looked up, meeting his eyes. You're part of the reason I'm so torn. Her brow furrowed slightly. What do you mean? I mean that I've grown to care about you. A lot. Elliot admitted, his voice steady despite the vulnerability in his words, and the thought of leaving you behind, I don't know if I can do that. Lily's eyes softened, and for a moment Elliot thought she might smile, but instead she let out a quiet sigh, her fingers tightening around his. Elliot, I care about you too, more than I thought I would, but I don't want to be the reason you give up something important to you. You're not, Elliot said quickly, shaking his head. It's not about that. It's about finding what makes me happy, and I think I found some of that here. Lily smiled softly, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. I just don't want you to regret staying. Elliot's heart ached at the sadness in her voice. He knew she was worried, that she didn't want to be the reason he walked away from a career he had worked so hard to build. But the truth was, Willow Creek had given him something that the city never had: peace, contentment, and a chance to breathe. I won't regret it, Elliot said quietly. If I stay, it's because I want to, not because of anything or anyone else. Lily was quiet for a long moment, her eyes searching his as if trying to find the truth in his words. Finally, she nodded, her expression softening. Okay. They sat in silence for a while longer, the warmth of the cocoa and the soft crackle of the wood stove filling the space between them. There were no easy answers, no simple solutions, but in that moment, sitting with Lily in the quiet of his farmhouse, Elliot realized that sometimes it wasn't about having everything figured out. Sometimes it was about taking things one day at a time and letting the future unfold as it would. I'm glad you stopped by, Elliot said after a while, his voice quiet. Lily smiled, her eyes soft. Me too. As she stood to leave, Elliot walked her to the door, the cold wind whipping through the trees as they stepped outside. She paused at the bottom of the porch steps, turning to look at him. Whatever you decide, she said softly, I just want you to be happy. Elliot's heart ached at the sincerity in her voice, and he nodded, offering her a small smile. I will be. Lily gave him one last smile before turning and walking down the driveway, her figure slowly disappearing into the fading light of the afternoon. Elliot watched her go, the weight of his decision pressing down on him more than ever. But as he stood there, on the porch, the cold wind biting at his skin, he realized that no matter what he chose, one thing was clear. He couldn't imagine a future without Lily in it. If you like this chapter, please leave a like and comment. Don't forget to share and follow, and stay tuned for Chapter 8 of Autumn's Embrace.